Hello and welcome to our event today, Local Films Go Global, an example from Aberdeen. Thanks very much for coming along today. My name is David Oswald. I'm the Local Heritage Librarian with Aberdeen City Libraries. And with me is Anne Cameron, a curator from the Moving Image Archive at National Library of Scotland.
Hi there. Hi.
And also with us in the background is Beth Cochrane, who's Events and Learning Coordinator, and she's just making sure everything goes smoothly. She's going to join us for the Q&A at the end. So before we get started, I'll briefly explain the structure of today's event, just to know what to expect. So Anne's going to start off telling us a bit about the National Library of Scotland's Moving Image Archive. And then I'm going to give you some background on today's event and how we hope to find out a bit more about the event, the films we're going to watch today. And I'll also introduce the man responsible for creating the films, Ernest Bromberg, really interesting chap. So then we'll watch the films, which takes about maybe half an hour or so. And then afterwards, we'll have time for a Q&A, where we can discuss the films and the Moving Image Archive in a bit more detail. And for this, whenever any questions come to you, use the Q&A function in Zoom, just add your questions in, and we can come to those at the end of the Q&A section. But yeah, now we'll just hand over to Anne to get us started.
Right, thanks so much, David. I'll just do the technological wizardry and try and share my screen with you all. Here we are. Right. So one thing I need to remember is to push that away. So today, for those of you unfamiliar with moving image and sound collections at the library, I'll just give you a very quick introduction. The Scottish Film Archive, as it was set up in 1976 to locate, preserve and provide access to Scotland's moving image heritage. It then moved through various different organisations, including Scottish Screen, which you may remember, and we're now part of the National Library of Scotland, and we're based at the Kelvin Hall in Glasgow, where we've been since 2016. As well as the actual working archive, you can actually enjoy free access, free of charge, to over 4,000 digitised films, the full range of digital collections that the library has. So electronic books and journals, newspapers, maps, music and web archive. There's also a paper archive relating to the moving image heritage of Scotland that includes things like scripts, posters, cinema memorabilia, and also the records of Scottish Indigenous film production. So there's a whole host of things to come and see. If you want to come to Kelvin Hall or indeed George IV Bridge in Glasgow, you'll get some of those things as well. Right, try and move the slide. So what do we collect? Basically anything and everything that's moving image. So it could be celluloid film, magnetic tape, or indeed ones and zeros flying around in cyberspace. No matter what the format, it's the content that's on it that matters. And some of you may recognise some of these formats from films you may have in your attic, home movies, VHS tapes that you might play. Some of you might even have a DVD player, and we collect them too. So a ballpark estimate at the moment of what we have, maybe 46,000 items, give or take, and plenty of those haven't even been repaired or viewed yet. So you can see we've got our work cut out for us, just getting this stuff actually repaired, cleaned, digitised and made available to people. In terms of why we're here today, I'd like to introduce you a little bit to the library itself and why are we collecting local collections at all? What's the National Library got to do with actually collecting local collections? The library is proud to be part of a huge spider's web of archives, libraries, communities and people that care about saving moving image heritage. Local collections belong to us all, and it's not entirely the role of the National Library to collect everything, far from it. As the library's collection management policy underlines, we definitely do not work in isolation. A few examples of networks we engage with, for example, we are part of Film Archives UK, which is the national archives such as the British Film Institute, the National Library of Wales, as well as regional, really important regional archives such as Manchester or Plymouth. We have a key part to play in the network of Scottish public libraries and local authority archives, of which David in Aberdeen is just one cog in that wheel. We have partners in higher education. We work with donors ranging from individual families through to large corporations. Community archives are so important, and we need to work with them to tell the stories of archives and get involved with the people that really know about the content. And additionally, we have really good connections with broadcast archives, so BBC, STV and MG Alba, as well as other sort of local broadcasting such as community television or cable television. Likewise, the library is ambitious in its collection development policy. The Moving Image collection is selective, reflecting Scottish cultural, political and economic history, and in particular the lives of people and communities in Scotland across the generations. I'd argue that so-called local films are one of the main strengths of our collection, because people can relate to them as representing their unique histories, or at least the collective memory of time and place that we all have. Scotland's audiovisual heritage is not parochial. The films really do reach out to a global audience. With Moving Image, the term local is not only a record of a particular geographical place. Going right back to Edwardian times, one of the largest companies operating at the time was Mitchell & Kenyon, who you may recognise. With their tagline, local films for local people, they ensured that films shown in town cinemas were filled to the brim with events and people that wouldn't necessarily have made the national newsreel or paper. What they did do was forge a link between the cinema and the community. And if I'm so bold, I'd suggest that's what we're doing today. We're just carrying on that tradition of flocking to somewhere to see Moving Image, to engage with it and to try and have that sense of community and see what represents us. Local films are not by any means limited to these early topical films, but they also extend to contemporary amateur filmmaking and video making, or phones, whatever medium it's on, it's all part of Moving Image history. The filmmaker interacts with people, allows them to speak for themselves. There's no pressure of someone else funding a film, no hidden agenda, and there's complete freedom to record everyday events as they unfold. So this slide gives you a little taster of some such films, from Rutherglen to Fife. In one collection from Monty Ive, Richard's roving camera presents a record of community life, including the Grand Collie Dog trial or the new Galloway Gala Day, which is recorded in film as damp but not dismal. It's these humorous touches that I find give local collections their personality. On a more serious note, however, these films are nothing if we don't take the time and effort to describe them objectively and try and be really careful about how we're presenting them. Some collections come with lots of information, but others don't come with anything, and it's really hard to pin them down. So we didn't always have the internet with Google Images to help us identify a place, a person, a date, a building or a car registration. So yeah, we're very lucky, but we're still a long way from having described everything. Our online catalogue can be found at movingimage.nls.uk, and at the moment we've got nearly 3,000 films available to view from your house wherever you are in the world. You can browse by place, decade, biography, genre, subject, many things like that. And this particular slide just shows you a results listing from Ernest Bromberg's films. We've got dates and descriptions for many films, but some of the older collections, such as this one, lack that magical touch the knowledgeable local historian or amateur researcher can provide. So I'm going to have to stop now, because I think I've gone over my time, and I'm going to now ask David to take over and give us some background to our specific appeal for help.
Thank you very much, Anne. Yeah. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the background of the event and also how we're hoping to find out this extra local information to really enrich our understanding of the films. So I was previously mentioned, my name's David Oswald, and I'm a local heritage librarian of Aberdeen City Libraries. Go to the next slide, please, Anne. Brilliant, thank you. And then, so I work at Aberdeen Central Library, which you can see on the left in this kind of old photograph. This is in 1892, but it's much the same today. This old photograph is by a local pioneer of still photography, George Washington Wilson. But this event, of course, we're looking at moving images. So if you next slide, please, Anne. Yeah. And so this event, or our involvement in it, kind of came from earlier this year in February. We had an online local history conference. It was called Screens and Stages in the Silver City, and it was all about Aberdeen's, the history of Aberdeen's cinemas and theatres, particularly the kind of built environment where cinemas and theatres are still visible today. Next slide, please. And we had a great range of speakers on this topic. Some of these you can see the videos up on our YouTube channel, on Aberdeen City Library's YouTube channel. In particular, I would recommend Ronald Grant spoke on memories of Aberdeen cinemas. Ronald worked in Aberdeen cinemas for 14 years, mostly for the Donald family, who you might have heard of if you're from Aberdeen. He used to own a load of cinemas around. And he later left Aberdeen and he went and formed the Cinema Museum in London, and it has many interesting artifacts which he salvaged from Aberdeen cinemas down in London. His reminiscences are fascinating. I'd also recommend, there's a really good one on there by Paul Maloney on theatre in context, using the archive to bring theatre stories alive. If I go on to the next slide, one of our most popular talks at the conference was Janet McBain on the Silver City on the Silver Screen, Aberdeen's history reflected on film. Janet was the founding curator of the Scottish Screen Archive, which is now the Moving Image Archive, and her talk looked at the representation of Aberdeen and its citizens in films made by local exhibitors and shown in the city's cinemas. A key element in this representation were local topical films. These were short local, local newsreels or records or filmed records of local events. And they more or less existed from the birth of cinema. In her talk, or her showreel, Janet showed the work of a pioneer called William Walker, who was an Aberdeen bookseller and lanternist. And he also worked, and also the work of his cameramen, Paul Rebello and Joe Gray. And Joe Gray was considered, he's thought to be one of the people who recorded the event shown in this postcard that we can see here. This is a postcard showing, it says Lord Roberts at Aberdeen, cinema operators at work. And this is the beach. This is Broad Hill in the background, absolutely teeming with people. And there's a big military parade for him. Essentially, he was a very prominent Victorian era general. And he visited the city in 1913 to get the freedom of the city. And he put on a big show for him down at the beach. And as you can see, this would be a perfect event for local topical, because the huge crowds have come along. And then they could later go to the cinema and potentially see themselves or people they know up on the screen. And also they could relive the event, or people who weren't there could see it from a sort of perfect view of the cinema camera up close. And it wasn't just huge, big, bigwigs visiting the city. It was all kinds of events. Joe Gray was understood to be he's understood to have filmed a champion fat baby competition of a Duffy Park in 1918, but sadly, it's not thought this film survives. If we go on to the next slide, another creator of local topicals who featured in Janet's showreel and who we'll be looking at today is Mr. Ernest A. Bromberg. A really interesting figure. So I've looked into him a bit more, and you'll find a good biography of him on the Moving Image Archive catalogue, linking to all the films they have of his. It looks like he was born in Newington in Edinburgh in 1905. His father was a man called Philip Wolfe Bromberg, who emigrated to Scotland from Lithuania. And he was a tool and hardware merchant. Ernest, he was actually born as Aaron Bromberg with an extra O, but he's dropped that, and it's now used, and that's Aaron is his middle name, so it's Ernest A. Bromberg. He moved to Aberdeen from Edinburgh. I think he spent some time in Dundee as well, perhaps, age 20, and he opened the Palais de Dance on Diamond Street. This is just off Aberdeen's main street, Union Street, and the Palais de Dance was a really important part of Aberdeen's social scene since it opened. And Bromberg was obviously a big cinema enthusiast, because he introduced events in the 1920s and early 30s related to cinema. This was its heyday when it was really booming in Aberdeen and around the country. He had a cinema ball where people won prizes for looking most like That's correct. Most like film stars, and also he had a parade for the release of Charlie Chaplin's City Lights. And it was in 1936 he opened a new cinema next door to the Palais de Danse, also just on Diamond Street. And this was the first of its kind in Aberdeen and only the second of its kind in Scotland. So it was quite unusual and quite unique. And he was obviously, as we'll see today, a keen cinematographer, as he made topicals to show in his cinema from the mid-1930s to 1940s on all manner of subjects. So things like royal visits of Winston Churchill, but also local races, sports days, openings of buildings, funeral processions, a really wide variety of topics he covers. And so these local topicals would have been part of comparably short programs of the new cinema, maybe lasting an hour, alongside things like comedy, local interest shorts, newsreels, cartoons, documentaries. And the showings would have been ideal for people waiting for connections, or travel connections, or those passing times before appointments. Bromberg in 1949, he left Aberdeen for the most part. He moved down to London and he worked as a financier and a film producer. But he did keep his hand in film exhibition in Aberdeen, and he'd come back to the city from time to time. He did eventually sell the cinema on Diamond Street. I think it was in 1963 to the Singletons of Glasgow, and it started to show continental films, and then it was known as the Curzon, and then the Singletons called it the Cosmo 2, the Cosmo 1 being a cinema in Glasgow, which is now the Glasgow Film Theatre. And so Bromberg eventually he actually moved to Spain, to Malaga in 1966, and it was in Spain, in Andalusia, he died in April 1973. On the right here, we can see a picture of the cinema, the new cinema as it was in 1977, not long before it closed. As you see, it's the Cosmo 2 at this time. And so that was when it closed down as a cinema, and there was much plans for what should happen to it. Eventually, although sadly it was eventually its fate was sealed when there was a big fire in the Palais de Danse, which at the time was a discotheque called Satchmo's, and then the fire spread to the cinema and it needed to be demolished. So if you go there today, you can still sort of see the sort of where the entrance would be, but it's now a car park, which is a little sad. But yeah, that's what happened to the cinema. So if we move on to the next slide. So the films Bromberg made and we're going to watch today, they were made for a local audience. There's that element of local films for local people. And, you know, that audience is no longer with us, but we can still learn quite a lot about these films using a bit of local knowledge and historical research. So next week, I'm going to lead an online event, as you'll see here, about how we can combine a bit of historical research using things like old newspapers, maps, directories, other online resources, mixed with a bit of local knowledge, and how we can improve our understanding of these films and contribute to the cataloguing of the films. For example, can we date them a bit more accurately? Can we identify more of the people showing and the places showing? So I'd be delighted if you want to come along. If that sounds of interest, please do come along. On the poster, you'll see, hopefully, how to book. Basically, you can email libraryevents@aberdeencity.gov.uk or give us a phone. Or you can also get in touch with me anytime. Best way to do that is at localstudies@aberdeencity.gov.uk. But yeah, now let's watch some films. So Anne, I'll let you introduce those.
Great, thanks, David. Today, I'm just going to do a reintroduction before I roll the showreel. I'll be honest with you, I suspect I'm a bit like some of the audience possibly here, in that I'm not that familiar with the films of Ernest Bromberg. The very nature of the National Film Collection is to collect widely over many genres, from non-fiction to creative performance archive. And sometimes you feel you just don't get that film detective time to really delve into a film and do the real detailed research. So these sort of ideas of bringing people together to research films is really, really great. And I'd be really interested to see what comes out of it. It felt appropriate to me to present a showreel of Bromberg's original silent films, just as they are. with a simple piano accompaniment added. You may note that some film runs a little fast, and this is because it's not quite been speed corrected yet. It's running at the original frames per second rate. 10 films have been picked by me today, just to give you a sense of his work in this local topical newsreel sort of footage. I'd really like to thank my technical colleague Stuart for putting the edit together, and also to Janet McBain for inspiring me to look afresh at Bromberg's work after all these years. We also have the blessing of John Jay, who was Bromberg's grandson today, and he's said it was fine to record the film show today and include it in the recording on YouTube that will be going up in the National Library's YouTube site. So again, people can revisit the film show here today and look at it afresh. You'll see some films have titles on them that describe the action, and some cover a hodgepodge of subjects. And this is typical of a newsreel in a local topical type film. But some of the films are still infuriating. For example, what's happening in the bus sighting in the last film. So I'm just going to run the show now. I'm going to sit back, relax, and I hope you enjoy the film, and we'll see you at the other end for some Q&A. Okay.